What happens when unchecked arrogance crashes against quiet dignity? In the glittering heart of the city, a 22-year-old waitress named Mia Russo is about to find out. For her, life is a daily struggle. For Henry Blackwood, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, life is a playground with no rules. One night, their worlds collide in the most brutal way, when a plate of truffle pasta becomes a weapon of humiliation. But this isn't a story about a girl who gets broken. It's about what happened the next day when the monster's father, the formidable Michael Blackwood, showed up not with an apology but with the keys to a brand new Rolls-Royce. The reason why will shatter everything you think you know about power, punishment, and redemption. Henry Blackwood existed in a world without consequences. At 24, he was the sole heir to the Blackwood capital fortune, a sprawling empire of real estate, tech, and private equity built by his formidable father, Michael Blackwood. But Henry didn't see the empire. He only saw the playground it provided. His life was a curated feed of indulgence, penthouse parties overlooking the city, spontaneous trips to Ibiza on the family jet, and a rotating cast of sycophants who laughed at his jokes and validated his every whim. Tonight, the chosen temple for his amusement was Aria, a restaurant so exclusive that its reservation list was a subject of gossip columns. Its ambience was one of hushed reverence for wealth, dim lighting, velvet ropes, and waiters who moved with the silent, practiced grace of ghosts. Henry sat at the center table, holding court with his two closest acolytes. Parker, a trust fund leech with a vapid grin, and Chloe, a fashion influencer, whose loyalty was directly proportional to the price of the gifts she received. The sommelier looked at me like I'd ordered a Coke, with this vintage Henry sneered, swirling a deep crimson liquid in his glass, as if his entire life's purpose isn't just to fetch grape juice for people who could buy his entire pathetic vineyard. Parker snickered on cue. He should be grateful you even looked at him stare. Chloe, busy capturing the perfect pout for her Instagram story, added, "Totally. The service here has gone downhill." Their waitress, Mia Russo, heard the comment as she approached the table. She kept her expression neutral, a mask of professional calm she had perfected over 4 years of working in high-end service. At 22, Mia wasn't serving Michelin-starred cuisine out of passion. She was doing it out of desperation. Her life was a world away from the gilded cage of the Blackwood heir. It was a cramped 2-bedroom apartment shared with her mother and her younger brother Leo, whose mounting medical bills were the silent, crushing weight that propelled her through every grueling 12-hour shift. Leo had a rare respiratory condition, and the experimental treatment that offered a sliver of hope wasn't fully covered by their insurance. Every dollar Mia earned, every generous tip, went into a fund they grimly called the Breathe Easy Jar. It was never full enough. "Is everything to your satisfaction this evening?" Mia asked, her voice soft but clear, addressing the table with the practiced deference her job required. Henry didn't look at her. He waved a dismissive hand at his plate of truffle carbonara. What is this?" He prodded a piece of guanciale with his fork, as if it were a strange insect. "It's lukewarm. The pasta is sticking." Did the chef fall asleep while boiling the water? Mia's practiced smile didn't falter. "I do apologize, sir. I can have the kitchen prepare a fresh one for you immediately. You think I have another 15 minutes to wait for something you should have gotten right the first time?" Henry's voice had a venomous edge that made Parker and Chloe exchange a small, excited smirk. This was the part of the evening they enjoyed most, the show. "Of course not," Mia said, her heart rate quickening. She knew this type of customer. The ones who didn't want a solution, they wanted a victim. I will inform the manager, and we will of course remove the item from your bill. Remove it from the bill? Henry finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. They were a cold, piercing blue, devoid of empathy. You think this is about the money I could buy this entire restaurant and turn it into my personal bowling alley by tomorrow morning? This is about standards. It's about competence, something you clearly know nothing about. Mia's jaw tightened. She could feel the stares of the adjacent tables. The humiliation was a physical heat rising up her neck. She thought of Leo's labored breathing the night before the quiet whir of his nebulizer. That was real. This was just a spoiled boy playing with his food. I understand, sir. My apologies, she repeated, her voice a little tighter this time. But Henry wasn't done. He wanted a crescendo. He wanted a story to tell. With a look of utter contempt, he picked up his plate. Let me show you what I think of your competence, he said, his voice dangerously low. And then he did it. With a flick of his wrist, he didn't just throw the food. He deliberately, almost artistically, upended the entire plate of creamy, sauce-laden pasta directly onto the front of Mia's pristine white uniform. A collective gasp went through the restaurant. The gooey carbonara slid down her shirt, the pieces of pork clinging to the fabric like grotesque barnacles. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Chloe's stifled giggle. Mia stood frozen, the shock giving way to a white-hot wave of rage and shame. The warm sauce felt scalding against her skin. She looked down at the mess, a Jackson Pollock of entitlement painted across her chest, and then back up at Henry's smirking face. For a single fleeting second, she saw him not as a powerful heir, but as a pathetic, empty child. The mask of professional calm shattered. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply held his cold gaze, her own dark eyes, burning with a fire he had never encountered before. I hope that made you feel like a big man, she said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving a trail of stunned silence and the faint, sickening smell of truffles and degradation in her wake. She didn't see the restaurant manager Jean-Luc rushing to Henry's table, bowing and scraping and offering apologies to him. She didn't hear Henry laugh it off, tossing a black credit card on the table and saying, "Just cover the mess," and her termination fee. She was already in the staff bathroom, tears of pure rage finally streaming down her face as she tried to scrub the stain from her uniform, knowing it was a stain that would never truly wash out. The walk from Jean-Luc's office to the employee exit felt like a mile of shame. The manager, a man whose spine seemed to be made of jelly when confronted with wealth, had been clinical and swift. "Mia, we cannot have incidents," he had said, avoiding her eyes and focusing on a speck of dust on his mahogany desk. "The Blackwood account is invaluable to Aria. You antagonized the customer. He threw his dinner on me." Mia's voice was incredulous. "And your response was unprofessional." Jean-Luc countered, his tone final. "We have to maintain a certain standard of decorum. It is best for all parties if we part ways. Here is your final paycheck and a small severance. You can collect your things." The small severance was a pathetic $100. It was hush money. It was an insult. Mia didn't argue. She knew it was useless. In the world of high-end service, the customer wasn't just right. They were God, and Henry Blackwood was a deity of the highest order. She changed out of her stained uniform, stuffing it into the bottom of her bag, like a piece of evidence from a crime scene, and walked out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring through her tears. The bus ride home was a slow-motion torture. Each stop, each new passenger was a reminder of the world she inhabited, a world of exhaustion, bills, and quiet desperation. When she finally pushed open the door to her apartment, the familiar scent of antiseptic and her mom's lavender air freshener filled her senses. Her mother, Maria Russo, a woman whose face was etched with the fine lines of worry, looked up from the kitchen table where she was meticulously sorting Leo's medications. "Mia, you're home early." One look at Mia's face, at her tear-streaked cheeks and the rigid set of her jaw, told Maria everything. "Oh, honey. What happened?" The story tumbled out of Mia, a torrent of humiliation and anger. She recounted the sneers, the condescending tone, and the final degrading act. Maria listened, her hand clenching into a fist on the worn tablecloth. That animal," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mother's protective rage. From the other room, a weak voice called out, "Mia, are you okay?" It was Leo. Mia took a deep breath, wiping her eyes and forcing a smile before she walked into his room. He was propped up in bed, his thin frame dwarfed by pillows. A clear tube ran from a humming oxygen concentrator to his nose. "Hey, champ," she said, her voice artificially bright. "Just a long night. How are you feeling?" "Tired," he said, his breathing shallow. Did you get any good tips for the jar?" Mia's heart fractured. She couldn't bring herself to tell him she'd lost the very job that was supposed to save him. "Yeah, a few," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "We'll get there, Leo, I promise." Meanwhile, across the city, the incident was already becoming a distorted legend. Parker High on Champagne and Schadenfreude had recounted the story to a friend who recounted it to another. By morning, a post appeared on a private blog that catered to the city's elite gossip circles, titled "How Aria's Service Takes a Nosedive." The post, written by an anonymous source, painted a picture of a rude and incompetent waitress who had aggressively confronted a prominent young philanthropist after spilling a drink. The story claimed Henry Blackwood had handled the situation with admirable restraint, leaving a generous tip to cover the inconvenience. There was no mention of pasta, no mention of humiliation. It was a masterclass in narrative control designed to protect one of their own. Henry woke up around noon in his penthouse, the sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. His head throbbed from the wine. He scrolled through his phone, saw the blog post, and smirked. Philanthropist. He chuckled to himself. He felt a fleeting annoyance at the memory of the waitress's defiant eyes, but it was quickly washed away by the tide of his own self-importance. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a momentary glitch in his otherwise flawless existence, a problem that had been swiftly and efficiently deleted. He had already forgotten her name. His day proceeded as usual. A session with his personal trainer, a meeting about a new passion project, a high-end sneaker brand he was funding with his father's money, and plans for a weekend trip to Monaco. The waitress, the restaurant, the cruelty, it was all less than a memory. It was nothing. But the echoes of his actions were beginning to travel through channels he couldn't control. The story wasn't just spreading among the elite. One of the busboys at Aria, a young man named Marco, who was friends with Mia, had seen the whole thing. He was furious. That evening, he anonymously sent a detailed, truthful account of the incident to a popular local journalist known for her exposés on the city's rich and powerful. He didn't have a video, but he had a witness account, and he had Mia's name. The journalist, intrigued by the discrepancy between the society blog and the busboy's email, started digging. She made a few calls. She began to connect the dots. The insignificant glitch was about to become a system error, and it was heading straight for the impenetrable fortress of Blackwood Capital. Michael Blackwood did not build his multi-billion-dollar empire by being ignorant. At 60, he was a man of immense discipline and quiet observation. His office on the top floor of the Blackwood Tower was less a room and more a command center. It was a space of minimalist perfection, steel glass, and a single sprawling oak desk that had belonged to his own father. From here, he saw everything. He monitored stock tickers, global markets, and political shifts with the same intense focus. He also monitored his son. He loved Henry, but it was a love strained by profound disappointment. He saw the boy he had raised full of potential and bright curiosity slowly dissolving into a caricature of wealth, arrogant, lazy, and insulated from reality. Michael had provided Henry with every advantage, but in doing so he feared he had removed the one thing that had forged his own character: struggle. Michael's own story was the stuff of legends, the son of a dock worker who had built his empire from a single shrewd investment and decades of relentless punishing work. He had hoped to instill that work ethic in Henry, but it had never taken root. Michael didn't learn about the incident at Aria from a gossip blog or a news report. He learned about it from a single discreet text message from a man named Arthur Vance, his head of security, and a former MI6 agent Michael had hired years ago. Arthur's job wasn't just to protect the Blackwood family from external threats, but to keep Michael informed of the internal ones, namely Henry's ever-growing capacity for self-destruction. The text was simple and contained a link to the busboy's email, which Arthur had intercepted through his deep network of city contacts. Sir, an incident at Aria last night involving Henry. A waitress was terminated. The attached is the account from a witness. A journalist is now investigating. This may attract unwanted attention. Michael clicked the link. He read the unvarnished account of his son's behavior, the condescending remarks, the demand for a victim, and the final vulgar act of throwing food on a young woman. He then read the name of the waitress, Mia Russo. The name meant nothing to him, but the details of the act filled him with a cold, creeping dread. It wasn't the potential for a PR scandal that bothered him. His team could squash that in an hour. It was the sheer pointless cruelty of it. It was the act of a tyrant, not a leader. It was a profound moral failing. He leaned back in his leather chair, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy he had conquered. But he felt no sense of victory. He felt a deep, chilling sense of failure. This was his son, his legacy. And he was acting like a petty monarch, tormenting his subjects for sport. Arthur Michael spoke into his phone, his voice a low growl. Get me everything on this girl. Mia Russo. I want to know where she lives, her family situation, her employment history, everything. And get me a full profile on the restaurant manager, Jean-Luc. I want to know where his skeletons are buried. Right away, sir. And Arthur. Michael added his voice, dropping even lower. Buy the building Aria operates in. I don't care what it costs. Have the transaction finalized by morning. I want to own the ground beneath their feet. Consider it done, sir. For the next hour, Michael sat in silence, staring out at the city. He wasn't angry. Anger was a hot, useless emotion. What he felt was a calculated, icy resolve. He had been too passive, too hopeful that Henry would find his own way. He had been wrong. The boy wasn't just lost. He was becoming a monster shielded by the very walls Michael had built to protect him. The time for passive hope was over. The time for intervention had come. A dossier appeared on his tablet less than 2 hours later. It was Arthur's work, thorough, precise, and devastating. He read about Mia Russo, her perfect service record, before Aria, her mother's job as a part-time cleaner. Then he saw the section on her brother, Leo Russo. He read about the cystic fibrosis, the mounting hospital bills, the desperate fight for an experimental treatment. He saw the Breathe Easy jar mentioned in the notes from a discreet inquiry. Michael felt a pang in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It was a ghost of his own past. He remembered his younger sister, who had died from an infection because his family couldn't afford the best doctors. He remembered the helplessness, the rage at a world that priced life just out of reach. This girl, Mia, was living his own history, and his son, his own flesh and blood, had taken her dignity and her livelihood for a moment's cheap entertainment. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't a problem to be managed. This was an opportunity to salvage his son, to right a terrible wrong, and to teach a lesson so profound it would either forge Henry into a man or break him completely. He looked at the digital file on the Rolls-Royce Phantom he had ordered for Henry's upcoming 25th birthday. It was sitting in a secure garage, a monument to unearned reward. A new audacious plan began to form in his mind, a plan of shocking intervention. It was high-risk, unconventional, and would plunge his son into the very reality he had so carelessly mocked. He picked up his phone again. "Arthur, have the Phantom delivered to my personal garage tonight. Have the registration transferred to a new name, Mia Russo." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Even the unflappable Arthur Vance was taken aback. "Sir, you heard me." Michael set his voice like iron. "And find out where she lives. I'll be paying her a visit myself." Tomorrow morning. The confrontation happened that evening. Michael had summoned Henry to his study at the family estate, a cavernous room lined with first-edition books and portraits of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors. It was a room designed for intimidation, and Henry felt it the moment he walked in. His father wasn't sitting behind his desk. He was standing by the window, a silhouette against the dying light, a glass of scotch in his hand. "You wanted to see me?" Henry asked, trying to project an air of nonchalant confidence that he didn't feel. Michael turned slowly. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were like chips of granite. "I had a conversation with Arthur Vance today." He began, his voice calm and even. Henry's bravado flickered. A conversation with Arthur was never good news. "Okay. He informed me of an incident at a restaurant called Aria," Michael continued, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Tell me about it." Henry's mind raced. He immediately fell back on the fabricated narrative. "Oh, that. It was nothing. The service was terrible. The waitress was rude. I complained to the manager and he handled it. Some people just aren't cut out for their jobs." He gave a dismissive shrug, as if discussing a faulty appliance. Michael stared at him, the silence stretching into an uncomfortable eternity. "That's not what I heard," he said finally. "I heard you took a plate of pasta and emptied it onto the young woman." Henry was cornered. She was incompetent. She had an attitude. "What was I supposed to do?" He blustered, his voice rising. "In my position, people expect a certain standard. I am protecting the family name from being associated with mediocrity." Michael let out a short, bitter laugh. "The family name? You think you protect the Blackwood name by acting like a Roman emperor, tormenting the staff for amusement. You think that is strength, that is the pathetic tantrum of a weak, spoiled child." The words hit Henry like a slap. "That's not fair. You have no idea the pressure I'm under." "Pressure?" Michael's voice was now a low, dangerous thunder. You have never known a single day of real pressure in your entire life. You have been swaddled in my wealth, protected by my power. Real pressure is choosing between paying rent and buying medicine for your sick brother." Henry flinched. "What are you talking about?" "The waitress, the incompetent girl whose uniform you ruined. Her name is Mia Russo. Her brother, Leo, has cystic fibrosis. Her job at that restaurant, the one you had her fired from, was the only thing standing between that boy and a medical system that will let him die because his family can't afford the treatment." Michael stepped closer, his eyes blazing with a righteous fury. "You didn't just throw food on a waitress, Henry. You spat in the face of a woman who possesses more strength and character in her little finger than you have in your entire pampered body." Henry was speechless, stunned by the depth of his father's knowledge. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but Michael cut him off. "Get out!" he commanded, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I can't even look at you right now. Go back to your penthouse. We will speak again when I decide we will speak again." Defeated and humiliated, Henry turned and left the study, the weight of his father's contempt crushing him. He drove back to the city, not with anger, but with a confusing, sickening knot in his stomach. For the first time, a hairline crack had appeared in the armor of his entitlement. The next morning, Mia Russo woke to the sound of Leo's coughing. It was a harsh, rattling sound that always sent a spike of fear through her. Her first thought was of money. No job. A pathetic severance. The Breathe Easy jar was still pitifully low. Despair was a physical weight on her chest. She was in the kitchen, staring blankly at a stack of bills, when there was a firm, confident knock on the apartment door. Her mother, on her way out to her cleaning job, answered it. Standing in the dingy, poorly lit hallway of their building was a man who seemed entirely out of place. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than their rent for a year, and carried an aura of absolute power. It was Michael Blackwood. "Mrs. Russo," he asked, his voice polite but firm. "My name is Michael Blackwood. I am here to speak with your daughter, Mia." Maria was flustered, intimidated. "Yes, come in." Michael stepped inside, his polished shoes, looking absurd against the worn linoleum floor. His gaze swept over the small, clean, but clearly struggling apartment, lingering for a moment on a photo of a smiling Leo on the wall. Mia came out of the kitchen, her eyes widening in disbelief when she saw the man from the gossip pages, the father of the boy who had humiliated her. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion and hostility. She instinctively moved to stand slightly in front of her mother. Michael met her gaze directly. There was no pity in his eyes, but there was a seriousness that caught her off guard. "Miss Russo," he said, his voice calm, "I am not here to offer a simple apology. An apology would be an insult to what my son did to you. Words are meaningless without action." He paused, then reached into his suit jacket. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He pulled out a small, heavy object that gleamed under the dim light of the overhead bulb. He placed it on the small table next to the door. It was a car key, a single elegant key fob emblazoned with the iconic double R logo of Rolls-Royce. Mia stared at it, utterly bewildered. "What is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It is not a joke," Michael said, his expression unchanging. "It is the key to a brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom. The car is registered in your name. It is legally yours. It is parked downstairs." Maya and her mother could only stare, dumbfounded. The sheer absurdity of the gesture was breathtaking, a Rolls-Royce. Here for them. It made no sense. This had to be a trap, another layer of humiliation devised by the wealthy and bored. "Why?" Mia finally managed to ask, her voice a whisper. "Why would you do this?" Michael looked from the key to Mia's defiant, questioning face. "Because Miss Russo," he said, the first hint of his true plan beginning to surface. "This key is not a gift, it's a job offer, and your first assignment involves my son." The air in the small apartment crackled with disbelief. Maria Russo looked from the impossibly expensive cork-key on her coffee table to the billionaire standing in her living room, her expression a mixture of awe and deep suspicion. Mia, however, remained rigid. Her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. She had been a pawn in a rich boy's game once already. She would not be one again. "A job offer." Mia's voice was sharp. "What kind of job involves giving someone a Rolls-Royce? Are you trying to buy my silence because it's not for sale?" Michael gave a slight appreciative nod, as if he had expected and even welcomed her defiance. "Your silence is the last thing I want, Miss Russo. What I want is your strength, your dignity, the very qualities my son tried to strip from you." He gestured for them to sit, and after a moment's hesitation, they did. Michael remained standing, a commanding presence in the cramped room. "My son Henry," he began. The name tasting like disappointment on his tongue is a product of a failed experiment. I gave him everything except the one thing that matters consequence. I built a world around him where the word no doesn't exist. The incident at Aria was not an anomaly. It was the inevitable result of his upbringing. It was a symptom of a sickness, and I intend to be the cure. He paused, his gaze intense. "I am not here to just compensate you for your lost job or your humiliation. I am offering you a position. I am establishing a new philanthropic arm of my company, the Blackwood Foundation for Community Empowerment. Its mission will be to identify and support individuals and families who are falling through the cracks of the system. People fighting battles against illness, poverty, and systemic neglect. People like you." Mia's skepticism wavered slightly, replaced by a flicker of intrigue. "And what does this have to do with me?" "I want you to run it," Michael said simply. Mia's jaw dropped. "Run it? I'm a waitress. I have no experience running a foundation. You have life experience, Miss Russo. That is infinitely more valuable than a business degree in this context. You understand the struggle firsthand. You have integrity. I can hire people with MBAs to handle the paperwork. I cannot hire character. I am offering you the position of executive director with a starting salary of $250,000 a year, full medical benefits for you and your entire family, and a discretionary fund to begin your work immediately." Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The number was so astronomical, so life-altering, it sounded like something from a dream. The medical benefits alone would mean Leo's treatment was guaranteed. Mia was stunned into silence. She looked at her mother, seeing the tears welling up in her eyes. Tears of hope for the first time in years. But the catch was still coming. She could feel it. And the car, she asked, her voice quiet. "The Rolls-Royce is your company car," Michael explained. "It is also a tool, a symbol. Which brings me to your first project as director." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Your first project is Henry." He let that sink in before continuing. "Henry believes he is entitled to that car, to that lifestyle. He needs to learn where it comes from work, from respect, from value. As of this morning, I have cut him off from every trust fund, every credit card, every cent of the Blackwood fortune. He is for all intents and purposes penniless. Michael's plan, audacious and ruthless, was finally laid bare. I have also, as of last night, acquired the parent company that owns the building Aria operates in. I am, in effect, Jean-Luc's new landlord. Following a persuasive conversation this morning, he has agreed to offer a new position at the restaurant. Mia's eyes widened as she realized where this was going. Henry's new job, Michael said with grim satisfaction, is as a dishwasher at Aria. He will work double shifts. He will scrub pots. He will be paid minimum wage. He will live on what he earns. And you, Miss Russo, will be his overseer. Your first official duty as executive director will be to drive him to his first day of work, in your Rolls-Royce. The sheer poetic justice of the plan was staggering. It was a punishment so perfectly tailored to the crime, it was almost diabolical. Mia would not be his victim. She would be the arbiter of his new reality. The car wasn't a gift for her. It was a constant, gleaming reminder to Henry of the world he had lost and the woman he had wronged. You want me to manage your son's punishment? Mia asked, trying to wrap her head around the surreal proposal. I want you to be his mentor in humility, Michael corrected gently. I don't want you to be cruel. I want you to be fair. I want him to see you every day in a position of power, succeeding with the grace and dignity he tried to deny you. I want him to see you driving that car, using the resources he took for granted to actually help people. The foundation will be your primary focus. Handling Henry is merely a necessary side project. He stood up straight. The choice is yours, Miss Russo. You can take this key, accept this position, and change your family's life forever, while teaching a lesson that desperately needs to be taught. Or you can refuse, and I will walk away. I will still ensure your brother's medical bills are anonymously paid. But my son will have learned nothing. What do you say? Mia looked at the key. It wasn't just a key to a car anymore. It was a key to Leo's future, a key to a life free from the constant terror of financial ruin. But it was also a key to a world she didn't understand, a world of power plays and vengeful billionaires. Could she do it? Could she face Henry Blackwood every day? Then she thought of his smug, cruel face as the pasta slid down her uniform. She thought of Jean-Luc firing her without a second thought. She thought of Leo's labored breathing in the next room. The fear she felt was eclipsed by a burgeoning sense of empowerment. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. It was a chance to turn the worst moment of her life into the foundation for a better future. She stood up and picked up the Rolls-Royce key. Its weight in her palm felt real. It felt like power. Okay, Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice clear and steady. When does he start? Michael Blackwood allowed himself the smallest of smiles. He starts tomorrow. I'll text you his address. Pick him up at 7 a.m. sharp. The next morning, the Rolls-Royce Phantom sat at the curb of Mia's apartment building like a spaceship that had landed in a forgotten land. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering in astonishment. Mia dressed not in a uniform, but in a simple professional black pantsuit she'd bought with an advance. Michael had wired her, felt a tremor of nervous energy as she slid behind the wheel. The leather was supple, the dashboard a futuristic marvel. It felt like sitting in the command center of a different life. Following the address Michael had sent, she drove to the most exclusive penthouse building in the city. When she pulled up, the doorman, accustomed to seeing Henry emerge from sports cars, did a double take at the sight of Mia in the driver's seat of a Phantom he knew had been destined for the building's most famous resident. "I'm here for Henry Blackwood," Maya said, her voice steady through the intercom. A few minutes later, Henry swaggered out of the building. He was dressed in designer jeans and a $1,000 jacket, his face a mask of irritation. He clearly expected a limo sent by his father to ferry him to some boring meeting of reconciliation. He stopped dead when he saw the Phantom. A slow, arrogant grin spread across his face. "Ah, there she is," he said, striding towards the passenger side. "So Dad keffed and got her for me after all. A bit dramatic, the whole 24-hour silent treatment, but he always comes through." He pulled on the passenger door handle. It was locked. He looked up, his annoyance returning, and saw Mia in the driver's seat. His brain short-circuited. The waitress. In his car. Mia lowered the window. "Get in the back, Henry," she said, her tone cool and professional. "What the hell are you doing in my car?" he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Is this some kind of joke? Did my father pay you to deliver it?" "This isn't your car," Mia stated calmly. "It's mine. It's a company car. Now get in the back. We're going to be late for your first day of work." "Work?" Henry laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "I'm not going to work. I'm going to see my father and straighten this whole mess out." "Your father isn't seeing you," Mia said, glancing at her watch. "Your new boss, however, is expecting you in 45 minutes. His name is Jean-Luc. I believe you've met." The color drained from Henry's face as the horrifying truth of his situation began to dawn on him. This wasn't a joke. This was real. He looked at Mia, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not a meek servant, but a woman in complete control. Defeated and with no other options. His phone disabled his credit cards, declined. He numbly opened the back door and slid into the plush leather seat. The ride to Aria was silent and suffocating. The crucible had begun. Jean-Luc, under the immense pressure of his new invisible landlord, greeted them at the back entrance of the restaurant. His usual sycophantic demeanor towards Henry was gone, replaced by a nervous, businesslike efficiency. "Blackwood," he said, avoiding Henry's furious glare. "Your station is in the back. Marco will show you the ropes." Marco, the busboy who had sent the email, was now the head dishwasher. A small, just promotion orchestrated by Michael. Marco looked at Henry not with malice, but with a weary indifference that was somehow worse. "Gloves are over there," Marco said, pointing to a box. "First you scrape the plates, then they go in the rack, then through the sanitizer. Don't break anything." The first day was hell. The heat from the industrial dishwasher was immense. The stench of leftover food was nauseating. His designer clothes were quickly stained with grease and bits of refuse. The other kitchen staff, who all knew exactly who he was and what he'd done, watched him with a mixture of contempt and morbid curiosity. They didn't haze him. They simply ignored him, isolating him in his disgrace. By the end of his 12-hour shift, Henry's hands were raw. His back ached, and his entire body was coated in a film of sweat and grime. He who had once complained about lukewarm pasta was now scraping half-eaten versions of it into a garbage bin. The irony was suffocating. Mia was waiting for him outside the Phantom, gleaming under the streetlights. The sight of it of her was like salt in his wounds. "Get in," she said, her voice betraying nothing. The ride to his new home, a small, furnished studio apartment Michael had arranged in a working-class neighborhood, was just as silent. He stumbled out of the car without a word, and slammed the door to his new pathetic life. This became their routine. Every morning, Mia would pick him up. Every evening, she would drop him off. She rarely spoke to him, maintaining a professional distance. During the day, while he was scrubbing pots, she was building a new life. She moved her family into a comfortable, spacious apartment in a good neighborhood. She arranged for Leo to see the best specialists, his treatment now fully funded. She spent her days in a downtown office, meeting with community leaders, vetting proposals and channeling Blackwood capital funds to daycare centers, food banks, and legal aid clinics. She was good at it. She was decisive, compassionate, and sharp. Henry, meanwhile, was breaking. His soft hands blistered, then calloused. His arrogance was sand-blasted away by the relentless drudgery of the work and the cold shoulder of his colleagues. His friends, Parker and Chloe, had stopped returning his calls the moment they heard he'd been cut off. He was utterly alone. One evening, about 3 weeks in, he finally cracked. As he got into the car, reeking of bleach and garbage, he didn't remain silent. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" He spat, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and self-pity. "To see me like this. Does it make you happy watching me suffer?" Mia kept her eyes on the road. "I don't think about you at all during the day, Henry," she said, and the simple truth of the statement was more devastating than any insult. "I'm busy. I have a job. I'm helping a dozen families avoid eviction this month. I'm funding a new arts program for at-risk kids. Your suffering is not on my agenda." Her words silenced him. He had assumed he was the main character in her drama, the focus of her revenge. To realize he was just a side project, a tedious task to be managed, was the ultimate blow to his ego. He sank back into the seat, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a hollow emptiness. For the first time, he began to see the vast, empty chasm of his own character. He wasn't the sun around which everything revolved. He was just a speck of dust, and for the first time, he was being forced to see the world from the ground up. The breaking point was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, grinding erosion of ego. It happened in the small moments when Henry saw Marco, the head dishwasher, leave work and get on a bus to go to his second job, when he overheard one of the prep cooks talking on the phone with his daughter, promising he'd be home in time to tuck her in, when he had to use his meager paycheck to buy groceries and realized he could only afford instant noodles and bread. These were the realities of the world he had never seen, the one he had so casually mocked. One rainy Tuesday, about 2 months into his sentence, an incident occurred that changed the trajectory of his slow transformation. A new busboy, a nervous teenager, on his first day, accidentally dropped a large tray of glasses, sending shards skittering across the slippery kitchen floor. Jean-Luc, reverting to his default managerial style, when not under the direct scrutiny of a Blackwood, immediately began tearing into the kid, his voice sharp and cruel. "You idiot! Are you blind? Do you know how much those cost? This is coming out of your pay." The boy flinched, his eyes welling with tears, and Henry, standing by the dish pit with his hands raw from hot water, felt a surge of something he didn't recognize. Protective anger. He saw himself in the manager's bullying, the same casual cruelty he had once wielded. He stepped forward, placing himself between Jean-Luc and the terrified boy. "It was an accident," Henry said, his voice quiet but firm. "Leave him alone." Jean-Luc was stunned into silence. The entire kitchen staff stopped what they were doing and stared. Henry Blackwood, the fallen prince, was defending a lowly busboy. "It was a wet spot on the floor," Henry continued, looking at the manager. "It could have happened to anyone. The restaurant should have a better non-slip mat there. It's a safety hazard. He then turned to the boy. "Don't worry about it," he said gently. "We'll get it cleaned up." He grabbed a broom and dustpan and began sweeping up the broken glass. The boy, looking at him with wide, grateful eyes, quickly joined in. When Mia arrived that evening to pick him up, Marco had already told her what happened. As Henry slid into the back of the Phantom, she looked at him in the rearview mirror. "I heard what you did today," she said. It was the first time she had initiated a personal conversation in months. Henry just shrugged, looking out the window. "He's just a kid." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense or hostile. It was thoughtful. A week later, Michael Blackwood summoned Mia to his office. "He's ready," Michael said after she recounted the story. "The punishment phase is over. It's time to see what, if anything, we've built." The next day, Mia didn't take Henry to the restaurant. Instead, she drove to a modest suburban house. Leo, looking healthier and stronger than ever, was playing in the front yard. Her mother was tending to a small garden. "What are we doing here?" Henry asked, confused. "This is my home," Mia said simply. "My mother wants to thank you." Henry was bewildered. "Thank me for what? Not for what you did," Mia clarified, turning in her seat to face him. "But for what you went through. Because without it, none of this would be possible." He got out of the car, and for the first time he stood before the family he had almost destroyed. Maria Russo didn't offer him scorn, but a cup of coffee. Leo shyly showed him the new video game the Foundation's funds had helped buy, in their simple, unvarnished forgiveness. Henry felt the full weight of his past actions more profoundly than he had under Jean-Luc's tyranny. He saw the life he had so carelessly trampled upon, and he finally genuinely broke. He turned to Mia, his eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry," he whispered, the words choked with a shame, so deep it was almost physical. "For everything. I was a monster." Mia nodded slowly. "Yes, you were," she said, not unkindly. "The question is, who are you going to be now?" Michael reinstated a small, heavily monitored allowance for Henry, enough for him to live on without working in the kitchen. The Rolls-Royce remained Mia's. The Foundation was her domain. But Henry didn't go back to his old life. He enrolled in night classes at the local community college, studying urban planning and social work. He volunteered at one of the shelters that Mia's foundation funded, starting at the bottom serving meals and listening to the stories of the people he met. He and Mia were not friends. A romantic relationship was never a possibility. The chasm of their history was too wide. But they developed a new dynamic, one built on a foundation of hard-won respect. He would occasionally send her proposals for the foundation ideas he'd picked up from his volunteer work, insights into improving the systems they were trying to fix. They were good ideas, born from his new ground-level perspective. One afternoon, nearly a year after the incident at Aria, Henry met his father in his top-floor office. "I've been reviewing your proposals," Michael said, gesturing for Henry to sit. "They're impressive." "I've learned to listen," Henry replied simply. "Mia is doing incredible work," Michael continued. "But she's focused on direct aid. The Foundation needs a second division. One focused on long-term infrastructure. Building community centers, affordable housing, creating systemic change. It needs an architect." He slid a portfolio across the desk. It wasn't a punishment or a gift. It was a job description. "The position is open," Michael said. "If you want it, you'll have to earn it. Just like everyone else." Henry looked at his father, the man whose respect he had craved his entire life. He finally understood that respect wasn't given. It was built. He picked up the portfolio. "I'll submit my application," he said. He left the office not with the swagger of an heir, but with the quiet purpose of a man who was finally ready to build something of his own. Outside, he saw the Rolls-Royce Phantom pull up to the curb. Mia got out, heading into the building for a meeting. They locked eyes across the plaza. There was no animosity, no awkwardness, just a quiet nod of mutual acknowledgement. She was a director. He was an applicant. They were two people whose lives had collided in an act of ugliness. But from the wreckage, they had both managed to build something new, something better, on a foundation of respect. This wasn't a fairy tale. The waitress didn't fall in love with the prince. This was a story about something far more real, the profound power of consequence and the difficult, painful path to earning respect. Henry Blackwood's journey wasn't about getting his wealth back. It was about discovering its true meaning. And Mia Russo's story wasn't one of revenge, but of empowerment, turning a moment of deep humiliation into a lifetime of purpose, proving that true strength isn't about the power you're born with, but the character you build. What do you think? Was Michael Blackwood's punishment the right move? Could someone really change that much? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life dramas that explore the deepest corners of human nature. Thank you for watching.